They told me Thanksgiving was canceled. Too tight this year, just staying in. So I spent the day alone. That night, my aunt posted a video. A full house, turkey carving, family-only invitations. Everyone was there. Except me. I stayed silent. Until Dad texted, "Can you help with the mortgage monthly?" I replied, "Ask the family you chose." Then I cut off every payment and watched the fallout. I, 32M, stared at the text message for the third time that morning. Dad had sent it 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, claiming they were keeping things small this year, just staying in, money was tight. I understood. I'd been the one quietly covering their mortgage payments for the past 18 months anyway. The house felt emptier than usual as I microwaved a frozen dinner on Thanksgiving Day. No football games playing in the background, no familiar chaos of my family's annual gathering. Just me, my laptop, and the silence that comes with being forgotten. That evening, while scrolling through social media to distract myself, I saw it. My aunt had posted a video story, and there it was, the whole family crowded around Dad's dining room table. The same table where I'd sat every Thanksgiving for 32 years. My cousins were there, their kids running around in the background. My sister was carving the turkey, laughing at something someone said off camera. Even my uncle, who supposedly couldn't travel due to his back problems, was there, raising a beer toward the camera. The caption read, "Family-only gathering this year. So grateful for everyone who made it." I watched the video twice before the realization fully hit. They hadn't canceled Thanksgiving. They had canceled me. I set my phone face down and finished my sad excuse for a holiday meal. The hurt was immediate and sharp, but underneath it, something colder was forming. I'd spent the last year and a half bailing them out financially while they planned gatherings behind my back. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 days later, Dad texted again, this time asking if I could help with December's mortgage payment. The bank was getting pushy, he said, and they just needed to get through the holidays. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back a simple response. Ask the family you chose. His reply came within minutes, asking what I meant. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my banking app and canceled the automatic transfer I'd set up months ago. The one that had been quietly moving $1,500 from my account to theirs every month. I also canceled the smaller transfers, the ones for their car payment, the utility bills I'd been covering, and the credit card minimum payments that kept their heads above water. Then I waited. The first call came on December 3rd. Dad's name flashed on my screen, but I let it go to voicemail. He sounded confused, asking why the mortgage payment hadn't gone through and if there was some kind of banking error. I deleted the message without calling back. My sister texted the next day, asking if everything was okay and mentioning that Dad seemed stressed about some bills. I read her message and archived it. By December 10th, the calls were coming daily. Mom left a tearful voicemail saying they didn't understand what was happening, that the bank was calling constantly, and could I please just call them back. I saved that one. Something about her tone told me I'd want to remember it later. December 15th brought a different kind of message. Dad's voice was strained, almost panicked. He admitted they'd been counting on my help and didn't know what they were going to do. He asked if they'd done something wrong, if I was angry about something. The desperation was obvious now. I wasn't ready to break my silence yet. The hurt from that Thanksgiving video was still too fresh, too raw. They'd had their family-only gathering, and now they were learning what family-only really meant. Christmas came and went. I spent it with friends, people who actually wanted me around. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from various family members, each one more frantic than the last. My aunt, the same one who'd posted that video, sent a long text explaining that they'd thought I was too busy with work anyway, that they didn't want to bother me. She asked if we could talk after the holidays. On December 30th, I finally answered one of Dad's calls. He sounded exhausted. He told me they were 3 months behind on the mortgage now, that the bank had started foreclosure proceedings. Mom was having anxiety attacks, and they'd had to borrow money from my sister just to keep the lights on. He asked me directly what they had done to deserve this treatment. I let him finish talking, then I told him about the video. About spending Thanksgiving alone while believing their story about canceled plans. About discovering that family only meant everyone except the person keeping them financially afloat. The silence on his end stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. He tried to explain that it wasn't supposed to be a big thing, that they'd made the decision last minute, that they didn't think I'd mind since I was always so independent. I asked him how 18 months of mortgage payments factored into that independence, how my covering their car payments and utilities suggested I wouldn't want to be included in family gatherings. He had no answer for that. Update 1. The conversation with Dad opened floodgates I hadn't expected. Within hours of hanging up, my phone was exploding with messages from everyone who'd been at that Thanksgiving table. Each person had their own version of events, their own justification for why I hadn't been invited. My sister claimed she'd assumed Dad had already asked me. My aunt insisted she thought I was traveling for work. My cousin said they'd wondered where I was, but figured I was busy. Everyone had an excuse, but nobody could explain why no one had bothered to actually check with me. The most revealing conversation came from my uncle, the one who'd supposedly been too injured to travel anywhere. He called me directly, bypassing the family text chains that had been buzzing nonstop. He told me something that changed everything. The family had been talking about my financial contributions for months. They knew exactly how much I was paying and had decided they didn't want to feel obligated to include me in family events because of it. They'd convinced themselves that keeping me away was actually doing me a favor, freeing me from feeling like I had to show up out of some kind of duty. The Thanksgiving exclusion hadn't been accidental or thoughtless. It had been deliberate. That revelation killed any remaining sympathy I might have had. They'd taken my money while actively resenting me for giving it, then used that resentment to justify cutting me out of the family circle. The twisted logic was breathtaking. I told my uncle I appreciated his honesty. Then I blocked his number along with everyone else's. But the financial pressure was mounting on their end. By January, I started hearing through mutual friends that Dad had been forced to take a second job. Mom was selling things on Facebook Marketplace. My sister had moved back in with them to help with expenses, bringing her own financial struggles with her. The house, the same house where they'd hosted their family-only Thanksgiving, was still headed for foreclosure. Dad had tried refinancing, but his credit had taken too many hits over the past year. Without my monthly contributions, their financial house of cards was collapsing exactly as I'd known it would. In February, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a family friend, someone who'd known me since childhood. She told me my parents were asking friends and neighbors for loans, explaining that their son had suddenly stopped helping them without explanation. They were painting themselves as victims of my inexplicable cruelty. That pushed me over the edge I'd been teetering on for months. Update 2. I decided it was time to set the record straight. I created a group chat with every family member who'd been at that Thanksgiving gathering and sent them all the screenshots I'd been saving. The video my aunt posted. The text messages from Dad claiming they were staying in and keeping things small. The timeline of financial help I'd provided alongside their decision to exclude me. I laid out the numbers in stark detail. 18 months of mortgage payments. Car payments for 6 months when Dad's hours got cut. Utility bills during their roughest patches. Credit card minimums when they were drowning. The total came to just over $37,000. Then I explained what I'd learned from my uncle about their reasoning. How they decided my financial help made them uncomfortable, so they'd chosen to take the money while cutting me out of family events. How family only had become code for everyone except the person paying our bills. The group chat exploded. My sister immediately started defending their actions, claiming I was twisting the situation. My aunt tried to backtrack, saying the video caption had been misunderstood. My cousins mostly stayed quiet, probably realizing how bad this all looked from the outside. But Dad's response was what I'd been waiting for. He sent a long message acknowledging everything I'd said was true. He admitted they'd been taking my money while secretly resenting feeling indebted to me. He said they'd convinced themselves that excluding me from gatherings was actually protecting our relationship, preventing it from becoming transactional. He ended his message by asking what he could do to fix things. I told him the truth: nothing. The relationship was already transactional. They'd made it that way by taking my money while deciding I wasn't worth including in their lives. The only difference now was that the transaction had ended. Over the next few weeks, I watched the family dynamics collapse in real time. My cousins started taking sides, some supporting my parents, others calling them out for their treatment of me. My aunt's husband apparently laid into her about the video posting, calling it cruel and thoughtless. My sister and her husband started having fights about money as the stress of living with our parents took its toll on their marriage. The house went into foreclosure in March. Dad had to sell his truck to make rent on a smaller apartment. Mom took a part-time job at a grocery store, her first job in over a decade. The family friend who'd called me in February later told me that several people in their social circle had started avoiding them after learning the full story. By April, I'd built a comfortable routine without them. I'd started dating someone new, someone who was horrified when I told her the whole story. I'd made new traditions with friends who actually valued my presence, not just my wallet. The money I'd been sending to my parents was now going into investments and experiences that actually enriched my life. Update 3. In May, something unexpected happened. My grandmother, Dad's mother, called me. She was 91 and had been largely out of the loop on family drama, but someone had finally filled her in on what had happened. She was furious, not at me, but at her son and the rest of the family. She told me she'd raised Dad better than this, that she was ashamed of how they'd treated me. She asked if I'd come visit her, just the two of us, and I agreed. Spending an afternoon with Grandma reminded me that not all family relationships had to be complicated or painful. She told me stories about Dad as a kid, about how generous and thoughtful he used to be. She wondered aloud when he'd become the kind of person who could take money from his son while excluding him from family gatherings. Before I left, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000, part of what she'd been planning to leave him in her will. She told me she'd rather I have it now, while she could see me benefit from it. She also told me she'd changed her will to reflect her disappointment in how the family had treated me. That evening, Dad called. Somehow he'd found out about my visit with Grandma, probably through my aunt who lived nearby. He was crying, begging me to talk to her, asking me not to poison her against the family. The irony of him accusing me of manipulation wasn't lost on either of us. I told him I hadn't said anything to Grandma that wasn't true. If the truth made him look bad, that was his problem to solve. By summer, the full consequences of their choices had settled in. Dad was working 2 jobs, but still struggling to make rent. Mom's part-time job wasn't enough to cover their medical expenses, and Dad's new employer didn't offer the same insurance benefits. My sister and her husband had separated, the stress of their financial situation having destroyed their marriage. The extended family had fractured too. Some relatives had sided with me after learning the full story, while others maintained that families should forgive and forget. Holiday plans were complicated now, with people having to choose sides about guest lists. I spent the 4th of July at a barbecue with friends, watching fireworks from a rooftop deck and feeling genuinely happy for the first time in years. My phone stayed silent. I'd blocked most of the family numbers months ago, and the few people who could still reach me had learned not to try. In August, I got an unexpected visitor at work. My sister showed up in my office building's lobby, asking the security desk to calm me down. She looked terrible, exhausted, defeated, older than her 34 years. She told me about her separation, about how living with our parents had destroyed her marriage. She admitted that she'd been jealous of how easily I'd been able to help them financially, while she'd struggled to contribute anything meaningful. She said watching me cut them off had been terrifying, but also oddly liberating. It had shown her that she didn't have to sacrifice her own stability for their poor decisions. She asked if we could rebuild our relationship separately from the rest of the family drama. She wanted to take responsibility for her part in the Thanksgiving exclusion and see if we could find a way forward that didn't involve our parents' financial chaos. I told her I'd think about it, and I meant it. Unlike our parents, she seemed to genuinely understand what she'd done wrong and why it had been hurtful. The conversation didn't fix everything, but it was the first honest discussion I'd had with a family member since this whole situation started. As fall approached, marking almost a year since that Thanksgiving video changed everything, I found myself reflecting on what I'd learned. The most important lesson was that being family doesn't automatically entitle people to your resources or your forgiveness. Love and support should flow both ways, and when they don't, you have every right to redirect your energy toward people who actually value you. I'd also learned that financial boundaries are crucial in family relationships. The moment money becomes involved, power dynamics shift in ways that can poison even the strongest bonds. My mistake had been thinking I could buy my way into being valued, when what I should have been doing was demanding to be valued first. The revenge had been more complete than I'd ever imagined when I sent that first text to Dad. I'd simply stopped enabling their dysfunction, and they destroyed themselves. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. In November, as Thanksgiving approached again, I made plans with friends for a proper celebration. No frozen dinners, no social media surprises, no family drama. Just people who chose to be there because they wanted to be there. Dad sent one final text that week, asking if there was any chance I'd reconsider joining them for the holiday. He said they'd learned their lesson and wanted to make things right. I read his message, deleted it, and went back to planning a meal with people who'd never made me question my worth in their lives. Some bridges are meant to stay burned, and some families are better left as distant memories than ongoing disappointments. The best revenge, it turned out, had been discovering I didn't need them at all.